as fake news, the Taiwan government has been, there's a very conscious effort trying to combat that by providing more tools and access to better information. Test. Hopefully it's better. But the main gist of it, though, is still combating fake news on our own. Kind of having that doubt, having that question. Question the argument every single time you run into a headline. Does it look suspicious? Checking the news source. As far as Mr. Templeman's presentation, as far as the local election and referendum, it was a bit of a landslide. Not really much in Taiwan's favor, unfortunately. But as far as the political science goes, unfortunately, it was sort of as long as you are not related to Taiwan, you would probably win out in that, unfortunately, because of the prior election, which was a landslide victory for the PPP. Moving forward, in March, Duaki, if you guys are familiar with him, Duaki, the rap artist from Taiwan, came to visit with two of his other artists, BR and Gawi, and we had a joint event with Cafe Philosophique. One of the things that I've been really wanting to do for our chapter is to reach out into our local community with other Taiwanese organizations. So Cafe Philo is a very, very young group, mostly our Stanford students. They like talking about philosophy, and philosophy and politics, they're kind of they're very, very close by, right? So with Duaki coming in, it's a very, very interesting kind of perspective in terms of, so hip-hop culture, right? 嘻哈文化, right? Hip-hop is a culture that was rooted from the blues, from jazz, from the blues. It was a music, it was a culture, for the oppressed, like from the oppressed for the oppressed. So it's actually quite appropriate for us to understand how does this work out. And a little bit of a tangent, I don't know if you guys can see in the bottom. On the left side, there's 最想突破的政治忌讳是什么? So hip-hop, the whole point of it is being able to say things that people cannot. So it's a very, very powerful force, hoping to draw in the younger audience. And the right, you can see where she went over to karaoke, wanting to kind of push forward with Taiyu with Hua. So kind of wanting to kind of push forward with more entertainment-based use of the Taiwanese dialect. But in April, we were very lucky to have our, still currently local, but not for long, FAPA Vice President John Lee, to host our Advocacy Workshop 101 in preparation for our Advocacy Workshop coming in September. Unfortunately, you can tell by the audience, it was a little bit lacking. So some fine-tuning still required, and we'll be working on that. Our Advocacy Workshop coming up in September. I'm hoping before that we'll have at least one, maybe two more workshops to get people prepared. One of the things I'm really, really proud of is this one. So in June earlier this year, last month, we were actually really lucky to join hands with Taiwanese Americans for Equality. It's a brand new nonprofit here in the Bay Area, pushing forward equality for marriage. And as you guys know, Taiwan earlier this year also passed their law. So we were very, very lucky to join in on the parade this year at SF Pride. The Taiwanese, actually this is our first year to have representation at the Pride Parade, and we've had, I think, probably around 400 people strong in our parade, which is really, really amazing. And even better, right after the parade, we actually headed over, since we were in downtown, we headed over to Assemblymember David Chu and Rob Bontes' office to say hello. And Mr. Chu actually was very impressed with our turnout, just saying like, wow, this is a first. And he actually asked us to stay in touch and basically look towards next year, if there's some more of a collaborative opportunity between the Chu office and us. Daniel?
Hey Phil, do you want to talk about last year with David Ting? Phil.
Yes, so last year, Daniel and I, so Daniel is our previous chapter president, we actually also joined Pride Parade, not with the Taiwan group, but we went to Pride, and afterwards we actually got invited to Phil Ting's office. I don't know if you guys are familiar, also assembly member. He was, shall I say, less than welcoming. We gave him our business cards and said we were from FAPA, what we represent, and he basically just said, well, unfortunately, what was his exact words, remember? It was something along the lines that, well, it's great that you guys are here, but, I can't really help you.
One very important point from Phil King, he asked about the Taiwan Travel Act, which we were pushing in 2018. and you said it is illegal for Taiwanese politicians to come to America. It's in violation of our one China policy, and which I completely disagree with. So it seems like if Mr. Ting is an assembly member right now, it doesn't touch foreign policy, but if he becomes more involved in, you know, I don't know, the higher levels of office, then this might be an issue. He currently represents, I think, western half of San Francisco downtown.
Okay. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rob Bonta, actually, but he was actually very, very impressive. I believe he's a Filipino man, but he was actually responsible for the Assembly Bill 1726. It's actually known as the Data Desegregation Act, which basically allowed, is calling forth basically desegregating data rather than just, like lumping together Asian, now calling forth basically sub-Pacific Islander groups, which includes Taiwan, mainly for education and for healthcare. It's also a very strong ally for Taiwan. Upcoming events. As I mentioned, I do want to have more advocacy workshops. I'm getting members prepared to go into our national conference. I'm going to not use this. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That's silly. Yes, much better. I like this. This is more, yeah. Okay, so advocacy workshop. First things first, how many of you guys have been to the conference in DC in September? Show of hands, please. Not that many, right? Ultimate purpose of FAPA is for us to, I mean, we're advocates, right? You know, we go to DC, we speak to members of Congress, we get them to support bills that support Taiwan. That's our ultimate goal, right? Not, I mean, food and all is great, but you know, like what sets us apart is that we're active. We do things. So, but me myself even, I'm not that great at it, but I'm still learning. And I want to have more workshops to make sure that more of us can get more educated of how to advocate for Taiwan, and then basically bring us more members to go to DC together. Conference is 9/14 to 9/16 September. Please mark your calendars. Later on, there'll be another slide to get a little bit more detail. In late September, Director Fu Yu, award winner for Best Documentary Film of the Golden Horse Awards earlier this year, she'll be coming to visit end of September, showing off her documentary, which won the award, Our Youth in Taiwan. It is actually a documentary talking about the Sunflower Movement, showcasing mainly Ting Wei-ting. A not FAPA event coming up very quickly. In a few weeks, New Power Party, Freddie Lim and Huang Jie, Shi Yiren, City Councilwoman, are coming to the Bay Area as well. I'll be posting them personally. Also be flyers at the front door for you to hang on to. That's in a few weeks. So I like QR codes a lot. So if you guys have your phones, you should be just pull up your camera and just scan that. It'll take you to the website for more information as well as registration. So as I mentioned, the whole purpose of FAPA, what makes us different from any other organization is that we do advocacy. We go to DC, we get into the faces of members of Congress, and we try to make things happen. That's the difference. That's the power of FAPA. And we need your help. So there's that. These QR codes will be available later on as well. Going to the conference as well is a very, very good opportunity for you guys to meet our headquarters staff. Very good looking people. We have Mr. Mike Kuo, our president, John Lee, right over there, our vice president, the young handsome guy, Kazette D. Wu, and our new staff, Zhiyun Huang. A little more updates about what headquarters is up to. So we talked about our chapter activities. Headquarters recently they're pushing forward these top 4 bills. The Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act basically calls for the U.S. Congress, certain departments to keep an eye on, like the PRC's treatment for the Uyghurs. And you know that currently there's more than 1 million in excess currently in concentration camps. It's really tough for them right now. We want to keep an eye on them. Number 2, S480, countering PRC influence operations. Have you guys heard of the Confucius Institute? It's a very, very scary thing. Confucius Institute, it sounds really glorious, right? Confucius sounds nice, but it's not. It's actually it's actually a direct arm of the People's Liberation Army in China. It's military propaganda being spread all the way down to our elementary school kids here on U.S. soil. That's terrifying. So S480's purpose is to counter that, basically keeping an eye on these organizations, seeing what they're doing, calling for transparency and accountability. Number 3, of course, it's in bold. That's actually our main focus, the Taiwan Assurance Act. Taiwan Assurance Act, and I quote, asks the United States to reinforce its commitments to Taiwan under the Taiwan Relations Act in a manner consistent with the 6 assurances as both government works to improve bilateral relations. Also in the Assurance Act, there's also language in terms of military and trade as well. The one that's currently still being worked on, we have a act that's in progress that's sanctioning the PRC's activity in the East and South China Sea. Of course, there's a lot of dispute in terms of the islands in that region and general territorial lines that they don't quite abide by. 2 other ones that are they're in the works. I don't want to say that they're on the back burner because they're not, but other items of interest, of course, are regaining Taiwan's status as observer and the World Health Organization, as well as the latest, the newest, is our support for the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, given what's happening in Hong Kong right now. And speaking of which, on the back of the room, hopefully before the end of today, I put it together a Lennon wall, basically little post-it notes showing little phrases of support for Hong Kong. So please head over there, write a little note of support, and hopefully we can have a group photo at the end, and I'll send that over to Hong Kong to the supporters. A lot of the Hong Kong organizations actually are based here in the Bay Area. Many of them have flown to Hong Kong, to kind of help organize and support the very difficult times over there. So I think for us, it's a big part that we should support as well. You'll notice from this list, there's a lot of things that aren't directly related to Taiwan, and that's actually intentional. In the last year at FAPA headquarters, one of the things that we're trying to do is to do more outreach, reaching out to other organizations that share a common, for lack of a better word, enemy. It's not the time right now to say who's different from who. It's the time to say, hey, you know what, let's work together, more togetherness. Talking about line earlier, as far as the communication, here's a QR code to add a line group for FAPA Northern California. I'm hoping this to be a nice communication channel for us to kind of keep updated, for me to push content for you guys from news articles. And actually, hell, if you have articles that you guys have questioned, like, hey, is this true? Is this real news? Is this fake news? Send it into the group. We'll find out for you guys. Events will be posted here as well. And again, these QR codes will be available after the presentation. Final thoughts. Again, I know I went through this very, very quickly. Again, I don't think I am the star today, but a bit updates for the oh, yes. Again, I don't, final thoughts. As I mentioned, the purpose of FAPA is advocacy. You do realize that all that we're doing here means nothing if you don't go back to Taiwan and vote, right? We are currently facing an election that is kind of difficult. I know that a lot of people in the audience probably are very upset with the current selection of candidates, but there's not that much time left. There's 200 days. There's not that much time left for us to really kind of try to change things right now. I mean, we have what we have, and that's kind of like, it's the double-edged sword of democracy, right? People vote, and we respect that. And together we move forward. If we choose to separate, we fall apart. So I do urge people to go back to Taiwan, come this winter, and make that vote, because if we don't, the other side will. Yeah. And thank you for your time. Again, here are the 2 QR codes from the presentation. On the left, it's for the line chat for FAPA, our NorCal chapter. On the right, information for our advocacy conference coming up. Thank you for your time. Pass the mic over to John, who will distinguish. Oh, right, yes. So as far as Q&A is concerned, again, in efforts to save time, we'll be passing it out note paper here, pen and paper. Please write down your questions. for myself or for Steve and Kelsey, and we'll address them at the very end. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming. Did you all have enough to eat? Jababo. All right, well, fantastic. I would like to thank Yame and Ruby. I know Ruby couldn't join us from NATWA, who helped order all this wonderful, wonderful food. It's delicious. Definitely a step up from normally what we get, so hopefully you guys have recognized that. Better than and Grace, yes, we mentioned for the dessert, and Mr. the Tongchang Hui Huizang for the ducks. So thank you so much for all that wonderful sustenance. So we're going to get on to the main event now. We have a couple distinguished people to speak to us today. First and foremost is Steve Yates, a longtime friend of Taiwan, of FAPA in general. He has a very, very, very experienced and deep career around foreign relations, around China, around Taiwan. He has his master's degree in China studies from Johns Hopkins, I believe. Started off as an analyst at the NSA, and then also was a senior analyst at the Heritage Foundation. Since then, though, he's also had a professional career at the White House from 2001 to 2005 as the Deputy Assistant to the Vice President. He was also serving as a professor of practice at Boise State University, and most recently has been consulting with FAPA. So we thought he would have a lot of great perspectives to share on all of the recent events that have been surrounding Taiwan, with, as you can see, with Hong Kong, with the arms sales, with all the communications, the passing of the Taiwan Travel Act, that is probably one of the most exciting times we've seen in the past probably 3 decades, but you guys would know better than me on that point. We also have Kelsey Coburn, who's here, an associate of Steve, and she has a lot of great insights on how to think about some more grassroots advocacy, community relationship building, that she'll also share her experiences. So without further ado, I'd like to have Steve come up and talk.
Is this working?
Yeah, working.
I don't know if this is better or if I just yell. Excuse me. Well, thank you very, very much for welcoming me and my colleague Kelsey to come and visit today. Thank you for the glorious food. There's one thing that is a blessing and a curse when doing anything that has to do with Taiwan, is that the love language of Taiwan is food. And there's so much love in this room, and there's so much food in my belly. And it just makes it somewhat difficult to try to stay healthy. But I do appreciate the love and care and support that the Taiwanese American community has given to me over the years. And I also just want to do everything that I can to share a few experiences that I've had that hopefully can help us be better at doing what we really believe in and trying to persuade more Americans to see being pro-Taiwan as a pro-American position. As all of you know, that for decades there's been a lot of hard work done on advocating on Taiwan issues. A lot of different Taiwanese organizations exist in the U.S. You know them better than I do, but from the moment I first started dealing with people in the Taiwanese community, it seemed like if there were 3 different Taiwanese people, there were 5 different arguments going on. And so there's always more organizations and more competition and more leaders of everything. And in some ways, the challenge is how do we organize and focus and do things in a way that make it very accessible for the rest of America to feel like this is something that I believe in, this is something that I want to be a part of, this is something that I can do something about. So today, I hope that some of the things that I share and that Kelsey shares will give you some ideas about things we might do differently. Now, some of you might be doing some of these things already, and all we can say is thank you and congratulations for doing such good things already. But I think it's useful from time to time to have a little bit of a brainstorm and to think about how other people might consider some ideas or initiatives that can broaden knowledge of Taiwan and so get more people helping to press our leaders to do the right thing when it comes to their dealings with China and Taiwan. Of course, a lot has changed recently. We would have had a fundamentally different conversation 6 months ago because we had a primary process in Taiwan that was coming. It hadn't arrived yet. There was murmurs in Hong Kong, but not the full-blown demonstrations that I have to say are quite shocking to me, not in a bad way. In some ways, it's very inspiring, but at the same time, it's very, very scary that it's this necessary, that the reality of the Communist Party of China is just beginning to dawn on people. Some of us have seen the ugly side of the Communist Party of China for a long time, and it's really taken, I think, tragically too long for a lot of the rest of the world to have some sense of a kind of a sudden enlightenment that this is really one of the most evil, destructive, and malicious forces ever known to mankind. No group has ever killed more people than the Communist Party of China has. And almost all of them were Chinese people. And it's just disgusting that the Chinese people have to continue to suffer under this. But what's worse is that because of mistakes that our government and many other governments have made, some of which I participated in, I'm not a perfect person, that advocating policies towards dealing with China, we enabled this threat to go from being able to tragically persecute the Chinese people to being a perverse influence in the international system, and now attacking the institutions of freedom and democracy in other countries. Taiwan is at the forefront of these kinds of influence operations that was talked about. Very important topic. Taiwan, per capita, is the most cyber-attacked place on the planet. So if we want to study in the United States how to handle cyber attacks, maybe we should invest a great deal in studying how Taiwan is attacked. Because as delicate a situation as Taiwan finds itself in, it's still there. And that means that they've been doing some things right, and maybe there's some best practices we should share. Well, in the United States, we spent a couple of years talking about the Russians. And I'm not here to debate whether the Russians are good or bad. Vladimir Putin, not a good man. But the kind of things that our country was talking about for the last 2 years are peanuts compared to what the Communist Party of China does. Not just against Taiwan, in the United States, and they've been doing it for decades. And so it's now time that people have become somewhat aware that there's a problem. There's been a movement against the Confucius Institutes. One of the greatest ironies in my entire career is to find out that the Communist Party of China, that had a massive anti-Confucius campaign, where they were destroying all historical places and documents having to do with Confucius, now uses Confucius Institutes to try to manipulate foreigners. It's just a strange, strange twist of fate. But these now have become better known. We have United States senators, members of the House of Representatives that have been supporting bills that are starting to pass and get implemented to try to educate our states and our localities and our universities how they can begin to turn this tide. But we're starting late. So in recent years, we've made some progress. In this year, there's a much, much more awareness of the real threat that the Communist Party of China presents. I think, in a very, very strange way, the Communist Party of China has endorsed President Tsai Ing-wen's re-election. I don't think they meant to do that, and I don't think that they even are aware of what they're doing in that regard. But Xi Jinping did not have to be such a belligerent jerk in his New Year's Eve speech, but he was. And that gave President Tsai a chance to respond. And her response was pretty good. Now, they didn't have to build concentration camps for Uyghurs. They had been slow cooking that frog for decades. They had been moving Han people in to dilute the ethnicity. They had been destroying an awareness of religion, an awareness of local dialects, and they have been completely changing the politics of Xinjiang the way they've been trying to do the same in Tibet, Xizang. But that had mostly been working. But for some reason, the Communist Party of China seems to know it's more vulnerable than we think it is. And so it decided slow wasn't good enough. And now we have the largest scale re-education through hard labor, in some cases extermination, going on inside of China. And up until very, very recently, almost no one in the world knew or cared. And even now, the news has been flowing about Xinjiang for months. The Washington Post, which any of you who know my background, you know that I'm not a fan of the politics of the Washington Post. But the Washington Post has every single month of 2019 had a lead editorial talking about the Uyghurs and the Chinese persecution of the Uyghurs, and how if the words never again are going to ever have meaning, then something needs to be done about the Uyghurs. Yet it's very, very difficult for us to figure out what is going to be done. So we're at the point where awareness is peaking, but the prescription of what to do, we still have some work to do. So as FAPA members, I'm very, very excited about the opportunity that all members have to try to find ways to converse and engage people who are not Taiwanese, people who maybe have never come to a FAPA meeting, people who maybe haven't had this glorious buffet of food. But they need to feel some of your love. And you can share some of that on some of these broader issues, hopefully to get more people involved into pro-Taiwan advocacy. I've been involved in politics for a lot of my life. Some of it just as an advisor, a policy person. Some of it was actually working hard to try to do things to get people elected, worked to try to get myself elected a time or two. And in doing that, there's some hard lessons that you get in politics that need to inform what we do as FAPA to try to change American policy for the better. Politics is a game of numbers. It doesn't matter how likable or unlikable you are. If you don't get the right number of votes, you're still not in office. Or if you have a good person that you like that is advocating your issue, and yet you don't get the requisite number of votes and the resolution or law doesn't pass, you still lost. And we still have work to do. And so we need numbers. And as wonderful as the Taiwanese American community is, the numbers are not big enough to make state legislatures and the United States Congress every single time have to listen to what does the Taiwanese American community think about this. And we're going to have to move our policy in that direction. Think of how a lot of Americans have dealt with the issue of Middle East peace or support for the state of Israel. Who do you think the largest organized group of supporters for the state of Israel are in the United States? Just randomly. Who do you think? What? Jewish? Yeah. Anyone have any other ideas? It's evangelical Christians. Why is that? Because they care about the Holy Land, and guess what? Their numbers are larger than the Jewish community in the United States. And so the Jewish community and the evangelical Christian community can find common cause in an interest, and by multiplying numbers, they can actually have a much bigger impact on American policy toward a homeland than if they just stood alone in their own community, righteous, convincing about what they cared about, but by having more people who were not of their community be a part of that broader cause, has more power, more influence, and you get the votes, things pass, candidates win, and that's what we need to begin to try to do. FAPA's been around for decades. I honor the commitment, sacrifice that many people in this room have made, many people who are no longer with us made to get to where we are today. But if we're going to give meaning to the sacrifice of the people who lived through martial law, who were blacklisted, who've witnessed the tremendous change in Taiwan, if we're going to honor the legacy of the sacrifices that were made to get to where things are in Taiwan today, and to get to where U.S. policy towards Taiwan is today, we've got to do more. And we're going to need more people to help us. So, how to think about some of these things? Well, some of you know that I first got to know things in Taiwan when I was a missionary. And being a missionary is an interesting learning experience. Number one, there's some things that have to do with language. That's fun. You get taken as some curly haired, you wouldn't believe it, but I had very bushy curly hair at that time. And got dropped off into rural Taiwan in the south. So there's skinny white, curly haired, big glasses guy walking up to random doors and saying, "Hey, would you like to talk about religion?" Those people, no. Sometimes it would be a little kid that would answer the door. He'd look up and go, "Monkey, monkey." I don't know why, but Taiwanese people said I looked like a monkey. Then an adorable little kid would turn around and he'd say, "Oh, Dad, there's Big Nose at the door." And he'd come back and he'd say, "Daddy says no one's home." That's a little taste of missionary life. But what it did is it allowed me to go to places that are way beyond a classroom, way beyond a book, way beyond a newspaper, to meet with real people in their homes, to listen to their family stories, to listen to their struggles, to listen to their happiness and sometimes some of the tragedies. I was trying to spread Christianity to a lot of people who were not Christian. But I was also there to listen and to learn. And it was a tremendous experience. I would submit to you that while this is not a religious calling, but I think we, as advocates for a strong American policy in support of the security, human rights, dignity of the people of Taiwan, we need to be more missionary-like. Do you think that I wanted to wake up every day and go talk to strangers? It wasn't what I was raised to do. I felt awkward trying to do that. Sometimes I felt embarrassed. Sometimes I felt like my language wasn't good enough. Does that sound familiar? But you know what? There were people who were not nice. Daddy said no one's home. It was cute, but not really that nice. Then there was people who were super nice, who would open up their home and say, "You know, I don't really want to talk about religion, but I'll feed you guys a meal, and we'll talk a little bit, and we can be friends." And that was a good deal. And that's how I became someone who was interested in what was happening in Taiwan. I didn't sit down and say I want a history lecture. I wanted to know about real people and real experience. And if you can do that with your neighbors and your friends, people who don't come to these meetings, we might be able to get more people connected through their belly, in their heart, and in their mind, and then take action to try to influence the people we elect to represent us and make decisions. So there are some simple things, they sound simple anyway, that any organization can do to advocate for a candidate, for an issue, what have you. And as FAPA members, we're a part of an issue advocacy organization in the sense that we're a 501c3 organization where we advocate policy. And the tools that we use to do that in many ways can be similar to the tools that lots of people use in politics. So before going too much further, I want to invite my colleague Kelsey to come forward. Kelsey, as was mentioned, she was, I don't think it was mentioned that she has a degree in communications from Northwest Nazarene University. She worked in the Idaho Republican Party headquarters office on communications when I was chairman. And she was also the manager of my campaign when we ran for lieutenant governor in Idaho. But Kelsey has some, she's also been to Taiwan 3 times in the last year. So now she's a full-fledged expert in Taiwan. And she's going to share with you some thoughts, impressions about what people know about Taiwan who, unlike me, weren't dropped into the countryside to talk to people's houses. But also talk about some of these tools. So Kelsey, over to you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to echo Steve's thanks in giving us both the opportunity to speak a little bit today. As you mentioned, my background is in politics, working for the Republican Party, so it had nothing to do with Taiwan, with Asia, or literally anything related to Taiwan. So if you'd asked me 2 years ago what I knew about issues related to Taiwan, its sovereignty, US and Taiwan relations, it would have been next to nothing. And most Americans are in that same boat. So since then, I've had the opportunity to go to Taiwan now 3 times. I've gotten to engage with FAPA chapters around the country, and I've had the experience that most Americans have when they interact with the Taiwanese community, which is that you all are warm and hospitable and friendly, and it just makes it so easy to be an advocate for Taiwan. But most people have no idea anything having to do with Taiwan. So a couple weeks ago, I was home talking to my dad, and first of all, more often than not, he talks about Thailand instead of Taiwan. So that's the first hump that we have to get over, is realizing they're separate countries. But he said, he was talking and said something about the United States ambassador to Taiwan. I said, well, Dad, we technically don't have an ambassador. He's like, well, why not? Okay, first of all, good question. That's a whole other thing. It's like, we don't have official formal diplomatic relations. And he's just like, oh, that makes no sense. Maybe Trump will change that. And, well, that's probably not going to happen in the next year. That's an example of what most of your average American thinks when they hear the situation, the relations between the United States and Taiwan, and the One China policy and all of these other issues. Is it's, oh yeah, we should support Taiwan. They're a democratic country. We're a democratic country. Why don't we support them more? But it comes down to an issue of not enough people understanding. So in Washington, D.C., as Steve was mentioning, there's one group of people that elected officials listen to more than anyone else, and that's their constituents. We are a very small group of constituents. We need to get more people involved and more people to engage on behalf of Taiwan in order to build up that support and to get elected officials to actually take action. So there are a few small things that I think most chapters can do in order to engage their community. So the first one is when you're thinking about broader community engagement. The San Francisco Bay Area, where we're at, has a large business community. You've got leaders in technology, in literally every industry. There's probably a very large, or multiple, chambers of commerce in the area. It would be worth inviting the president of the Chamber of Commerce to come and speak to your FAPA chapter about ways that you can engage with the business community. Then that person, who is an influencer in their own community, has engaged with you. You'll probably feed them. They'll probably enjoy the food. And then they can go out and talk to their friends. So it's just building relationships with these individual business and political and community leaders that have their own circle of influence, and maybe who have a unique influence on elected officials that we don't already have. Something else I think that's important is youth engagement. And there are a few ways that you can do this. I think one of the most beneficial things that the Taiwanese American community can do is to find ways to assist young people who are attempting to learn another language. People are always saying that it's important to learn Mandarin, Spanish, whatever. But if you find ways to go into schools and be a conversation partner, or go into another organization and be a conversation partner and help teach people Mandarin or even Taiwanese, that's another way to build a relationship while also giving them a tangible skill. Something else that other FAPA chapters have been really interested in and are starting to do is putting together a scholarship fund for students who are who are in or going to college next year. So say you set aside $500 for a scholarship fund. And in order to get this scholarship, a student has to write an essay on ways that their future may interact with Taiwan, whether through business, politics, or international affairs. And you send that out to local high schools, and 20 people apply. You still only have to give that scholarship to one student, but now 20 people have done their research, applied for the scholarship, and learned more about Taiwan than they would have otherwise. And kind of the final area of engagement that I think is really important for the community is engaging with the media. So especially recently in the last couple of years, there's been more written on Taiwan than I think ever in my life, for sure ever in the last few years. Because there's, Trump is doing things on Taiwan, there's stuff happening in Congress, things happening in Hong Kong and in China in general, so reporters are starting to pay a little bit more attention. But a lot of times they don't have the time or the depth of knowledge to go back and understand all the nuances of the relationship between the United States and Taiwan. So as a FAPA chapter, we're finding people who are able to, when a story comes out from a local reporter talking about Taiwan issues, we're able to read that and just send them an email and say, hey, I'm a Taiwanese American. I think this story was great, or I think this story maybe could have changed it a little bit here. And if you ever have any questions in the future, feel free to reach out. I'd love to be a background resource for you. And that's just another way that you're able to build relationships with people. So in the end, it comes down to building one-on-one relationships. That's how I came to support Taiwan. That's how I was able to get involved. That's how my father, because of his relationship with me, now knows about Taiwan. Other people who I'm friends with who have never met a Taiwanese person, because I'm from Idaho and there aren't very many Taiwanese people in Idaho. But I have friends in Idaho, and because I've now talked to them, they have a different understanding and are able to be more supportive of Taiwan. So, welcome any questions on any other ideas that you guys may have, things you may be doing. Would love to hear about ways that you're engaging, and I guess I'll turn it back over to Steve.
Okay. Thank you, Kelsey. So hopefully that gave you some specific ideas to consider. Now, as with any idea, you're going to be able to take some of it. Maybe you can adapt it to local conditions. Maybe there's things that you could copy or expand or do even better than we could think of. But I thought it was very, very important for you at least to hear a few specific things that can be tried in order to have more of a community engagement talk about not just Taiwan, a faraway place, but here's this issue that matters to people that are right here in my neighborhood, in my community, in my office, what have you. And what we're talking about is literally in the headlines. With the demonstrations that are going on in Hong Kong, I just don't see with them coming out so much now for so many weeks that headline is going away tomorrow. This is something that's going to last for a bit. As Kelsey mentioned, there's already a fairly sustained amount of coverage of the Taiwan election. And that's, it comes and goes over the years. In 1996, there was a lot of coverage because it was the first direct election of the president. 2000, it was covered a lot because it was a divided field, and the who'da thunk it happened, and the DPP nominee ended up winning not a majority of the votes, but won the presidency.